todo ese pequeño ejército que el día de mañana se considerará heroico, mucho más que los que lucharon con las armas en la mano. El ejército de los que un buen día dijeron que había que hacer algo.
The army of the good deeds said they had to do something more to protect a mother who never complains, who has given us everything we've got, a mother that we are killing. That's the harsh truth, unfortunately, and that's what Félix Rodríguez de la Fuente said. He was a naturalist and one of the most famous environmentalists of Spain, and above all, a person who loved Mother Earth, who gave him his life. Félix Rodríguez de la Fuente talked about a heroic army, an army that needs to revert an almost tragically inevitable end, an army of committed people who can get together, who can really bring others on board, because that's what it is at the end of the day, that we all learn to love and respect our Mother Earth as such, as she has taught us and as she deserves. And when I say all, I mean absolutely everyone, because this is a shared responsibility and it must be that way. And again, taking up the words of those wise people, Martin Luther King was always recalling that, in fact, we're all in the same boat. We're all intertwined in the same fate. And he would say that what happens to one person affects us all indirectly. And that's why what happens here in this room is so important, because it's incumbent upon us all, and we must push this forward and take it out as far as possible. Good morning, by the way, and welcome, obviously, to the 5th International Network of the Latin American Network of Solid Waste, the 5th edition of Relagres. And for the first time, this has gone beyond the borders of Latin America to come to Europe, to right here to Spain. And we're very mindful of the huge efforts that the over 80 members of the various delegations in Latin America have made to come here to Mataró to share their network, their experiences, their successes, and their failures and their dreams. And really, it's by sharing that we are going to be able to move forward to tackle one of the big challenges, certainly, of this country, which is solid waste management. So allow me, on behalf of the organizers, to thank you, very heartfelt thanks for those big efforts of all of those experts in municipal waste management and everyone else who has come from Chile, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay, Panama, Bolivia, Colombia, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico. Extended thanks and a warm round of applause, please. Thank you.
Para todos los presentes, para la ciudad de Mataró, para sus vecinos.
For all of those here, City of Mataró, neighbours, representatives, it's a real pleasure to have you here. We hope that you don't just enjoy it, but it's a very useful meeting, and that you take home with you a huge amount of knowledge, a good dose of experience, and a lot of energy. And we need that energy to continue working to look after the environment. And to do that, as you've seen with your accreditation, we have before us a very intense program over the next 2 days, and you can follow it right here. And by the way, let me tell you a couple of last-minute changes. Apologies from a representative of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food and the Environment of the Spanish government. For personal reasons, he had to stay in Madrid with his family, unfortunately. Also, Nora Padilla is unable to join us, also for urgent reasons, urgent situation in Colombia. So before giving the floor to the people who are giving the opening address, I'd like to just give you a couple of housekeeping details. There are 2 there are 2 days of meeting. You have them here. Tomorrow we start at 9. And there are 2 parallel networking coffee tables. It's very important that you register for the one that you want to. You can do that at the table outside the Secretariat or on the website. Another important point, tomorrow at 2:30 we'll be visiting the Maresme Waste Treatment Center. It's a very important center. You shouldn't miss it, but you also have to register for that trip. And again, you can do that upstairs with the Secretariat or online. Now, as to today, there are 4 major topics, 4 major areas. We have international speakers. We really want to try and stick to our schedule. I do ask you, please, to try and be as punctual as possible. We have an hour and a half for each topic, and we really want to have time to have a bit of interaction as well. That's very important, so that we can have a bit of Q&A, a debate. And so speakers, I do please ask you not to go over your allotted speaking time. So 11:30 we have a coffee break. At 1:30 we have lunch. That's all just outside here in the foyer. There are no problems with languages. As you can hear, there is interpreting into English on Channel 2, also into Spanish as well on Channel 1. So we want to make sure that you understand everything that everybody understands, and also that it's disseminated absolutely as much as possible. We want to take these messages beyond this fabulous auditorium in the Techno Campus in Maresme and tell the world what is happening here and what we're going to talk about here. And we have a fabulous tool for that, the social media. So we urge you to use them, use the headlines here, and we have a hashtag for that, Relagres, hashtag Relagres 2017. Sorry. So, we do want this message to go as far as possible, and also the whole conference is going to be streamed worldwide to help us with that. So let's kick off and officially inaugurate this 5th International Relagres Seminar. And to do so, I'm firstly going to give the floor to Mr. Oscar Curuchet, Chair of Relagres and the Deputy Mayor of Montevideo.
Bueno, buenos días a todas y a todos.
Good morning, everybody.
Primero, es un enorme placer.
Firstly, it's a huge pleasure to be here in Barcelona, and specifically in Mataró. And thank you to the Mayor and the organisers for the invitation. And thanks to all those who are participating in this event. We have people here from Latin America. All of our brothers and sisters from Latin America are here with us. And to hand over really Relagres of the last few years, and we're going to be talking about generating the change in paradigms that really repositions the construction of a society, above all looking to future generations. That's the challenge we face. We need to start looking at sustainable development and by transforming society. And that's really what we want to do, to look after the environment, thinking about what we can do jointly. And that's why we have this strategic alliance to share visits in different countries from Europe, especially we're here in Spain today, and that allows us to channel that strategic vision, which has a long-term vision but is materialized in specific actions right now to start making that change. Over the course of the debates and sessions that we've got programmed over the next 2 days, we're going to be listening to the situation in the Latin American countries and in Spain, but also the European outlook as well. We have workshops on climate change. And why not also start looking at resilience and the capacity to adapt that cities have to tackle the effects of climate change? Another aspect that's very important for us has to do with the development of a proposal, which is the circular economy and the ability to reuse, recycle, reposition, to optimize natural resources, and also to generate a new paradigm to bring about a new economy which engages cities in tackling what's going on in the world. The main paradigm change has to do with looking at each other in the eyes, recognizing policymakers, and structuring public-private partnerships to come up with proposals, associations, for example, of cities, political, regional, geopolitical partnerships that bring about change. Recently in Montevideo, we did a test, we carried out a trial in which we left a bit of paper, crumpled up paper, on the ground there, where there's where the people were going past, and for several hours people would just go past it and sort of get it out of the way. Nobody really was bothered about that rubbish on the floor there, piece of litter, and then an 8-year-old boy suddenly picked it up and put it in the bin. So it's that cultural change that we really want to bring about collective awareness that we all are responsible for what we do. And even being here today, we're bringing about that change by proactively taking part in the change that the world needs to combat what's happening, the effects of climate change, to see that as of waste policies and other aspects to do with housing policies and other city policies, how is society preparing to transform itself? And that's a responsibility that falls to us all of us here, and what we can generate from this conference. Right now, we're at the diagnosis and knowledge phase of sharing experiences, for example, what's going on in Latin America, with very different scales. Even in the South Cone, in Latin America, there are differences between South America, obviously, and Central America, and then again with Europe. These are very different situations, but they all share one thing in common: cultural and human change, looking at building society in not so much thinking just about our own little lives, but thinking about society as a whole, and moving towards solidarity in what we do, and really using the planet's resources for us all. That's the main challenge. Leaving behind consumerism, selfishness that we see around the earth, and to start giving way to solidarity, to social movements, so that we can bring about the profound change that the earth needs, and specifically the environment needs, and really take ownership of public space and of what we do, our interaction with animal life, with wildlife, in a friendly way, and to bring about this collective awareness that it is possible And we think it is possible, and that's why we invite you all to be proactive, to share your opinions and your experiences, so that we can start building the second link in the chain, which is moving from diagnosis to action. We're taking our knowledge to policymakers so that in various metropolitan areas we can bring about policies and a strategic action plan that seeks to improve the conditions of the environment. So that's what we challenge you to do. And I'd like to thank Barcelona, which is a city close to my own heart. I lived here for 6 years, and my father is actually living here. So it's always a pleasure to come back to Barcelona. And thank you to the organizers and Relagres. Thank you. Perhaps the word change is going to be one of the words that we hear most this morning, as Mr. Curuchet was saying. And as he said, we are all responsible and we are benchmarks in bringing about this social change that Mr. Curuchet has started off by requesting. Mercè Rius is the General Director of Environmental Quality and Climate Change of the Regional Government of Catalonia. You have the floor, madam.
Buenos días. Y en nombre del Departamento de Territorio y Sostenibilidad,
on behalf of the Sustainable Regional Department of the Regional Government of Catalonia, I'd like to welcome you, authorities, speakers and participants, to this international seminar of the Relagres Network. It's an honor to have this seminar here for the first time in Europe, and right here in Mataró, a Catalan city, which is a benchmark, as you'll see, I think, tomorrow in the technical visit when it comes to waste treatment. So as to have a city like Mataró hosting this important international seminar is a real honor. As you know, we'll be talking about the contribution of good waste management to the circular economy, the green economy or the low-carbon economy, and we'll also be talking about how waste management contributes to tackling climate change. For the Catalan government, these issues are extremely important. I'd also like to thank the organizers and the speakers for all of the work that you've carried out in helping us address how we can set up waste management which will contribute to these very important goals that we have, i.e. leaving a better planet for future generations, or at the very least preserving the planet that we have, and that's already a huge challenge. When it comes to the link between waste and climate change, I'd like to give you a figure on that from a 2012 report on greenhouse gas emissions in EU countries, in the 28 member states, which states that the role of waste management in climate change is 3%. Other studies shore this up, and we believe that this is a very low percentage. And it might seem that this low contribution to climate change effects would suggest that there's not much to do in this sector. But emissions from waste treatment is one thing. Now, if we look at this in a bit more depth, and we include prevention of waste and the circular economy in that, then the impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions is far higher. These studies conclude that potential savings for improvement in both waste management and prevention could be 150-200 million equivalent tons, and that is far higher than direct emissions that are what are taken to be from the waste management sector. Now, obviously, these improvements require a circular economy model based on recycling in part to reduce waste production and also reusing waste as well. So moving from the concept of waste to a concept that looks at it more as a resource. And in Catalonia, as we'll hear in some of the technical addresses that we have today and tomorrow, the circular economy, so reusing waste to minimize the impact, and even in the design stage, think about how we can improve management and curtail environmental impact. This is one of the strategies that the regional government of Catalonia is pushing forward, and which is cross-cutting. It's dealt with from the Catalan Waste Agency, also environmental and climate change regional ministry, and also the business agency, because it's companies, obviously, that have to implement this circular model economy from the production phase. The government is also very committed to tackling climate change, and right now at the Catalan Parliament, we're in the final stage of adopting a Catalan Act on climate change, which is pioneering in Southern Europe and which is aligned with both global agreements and European directives. The Paris Accord, then, which very unfortunately Trump's government has just left and has been criticized both from industry and other governments for that, local governments in the US and cities and others. And I think in the short term, this will prove to have been a strategic mistake. But the Paris Agreement opens the path to moving towards the green economy. There's never been such a unanimous agreement involving so many countries, not just countries, but also business, regional governments, and cities that are all committed to combating climate change. The European Commission wants a Europe that efficiently uses resources also, and that's one of the 7 2020 initiatives to bring about smart growth. And that's one of Europe's main strategies also to boost growth and employment, and that's obviously backed by the European Parliament and Council. In addition to the circular economy strategy that I've just mentioned and the climate change law that we are currently adopting, Catalonia also has a specific waste management law, Pre-Cat 20, a prevention and management strategy for Catalonia, which again is aligned with Europe and in some cases is even more ambitious. The director of the Waste Management Agency will tell you more about this when he takes the floor tomorrow, and he'll give you more of the technical details. But I did just want to highlight the change that we are bringing about in waste management and focusing on them as resources. So the Pre-Cat 20 program seeks to contribute to the life cycle of waste and thereby to reducing climate change and other impacts related to waste management and it seeks to bring about a 30% cut in the carbon footprint in waste management vis-à-vis 2012, among other initiatives. To contribute to climate change, then, we don't just have the pre-CAT 20, and we don't just think that it's the government of Catalonia that has to work on this, but rather all local authorities must act upon this. And I won't go into length on this because I know that we have speakers, the Mayor of Mataró, amongst others, who will be talking in length about their perspective on this. So that's all from me. I just wish to wind up by hoping that you have a very fruitful international conference and that your visits and exchanges of experiences, both nationally and internationally, they're always enriching for everybody. And so I hope you have a couple of days here, and that this will be a springboard for further action in combating climate change to leave a better world for our children. Thank you.
Now is time to give the floor to Mr. Valentin Junyen, who's the delegate member for Natural Spaces and the Environment of the Barcelona County Council, and he is the Mayor of Manresa. Good morning to you all. Mayor of Mataró, Director General of Climate Change of the Generalitat, Mr. Puig, the soul of this seminar, and from the time when he was a Member of Parliament for Catalonia, and everyone else who has enabled this seminar to take place. And I'm sure that it will be a great success on a technical level. We, as the County Council, have the responsibility of helping the local authorities in the sustainable management of municipal waste. And this is a responsibility of our local authorities, and we, as the supra-municipal authorities of the 312 local authorities of the County of Barcelona, are working shoulder to shoulder with them on this. The indicators of the intermunicipal circle of waste management shows that the cost of waste management is some €59 per capita per annum, and this is the fourth largest expense for our local authorities. If this is significant in terms of preserving our environment, our surroundings, and as the presenter said, our Mother Earth, the fact that it is only fourth in terms of municipal expenditure. Sorry, the fact that it is fourth shows the importance that it is. There is a direct environmental benefit for our towns and cities, but it's evident that our ecosystem, from the point of view of energy saving and the reduction of the pollution of water and air and soil, is something that we have to work together on. We have to share our mutual experience, and if something that concerns the municipal world, it's something which we together can learn, what the most advanced local authority in environmental management is doing, sharing our experience through the circles of comparison, the intermunicipal circles of comparison that Barcelona County Council valorizes and shares. The management of the organic fraction is that which most affects climate change, and thus the concern of all of our local authorities and of the County Council, where we are fighting to reduce its incidence. We require initiatives such as this 5th International Congress, and please let me greet the President of Relagres. I'm afraid I'm a bit nervous this morning, and it's Monday, where every Monday we have strikes on the Barcelona metro, so don't leave Metro. It's a great place. You don't need to go down to the capital. At least when you go to the airport, you can go and see Barcelona. But for today, when there is this strike, you should stay in Metro. And I'm sure you'll appreciate this advice. Barcelona County Council, as a support to the local authorities, has developed a specific line which the representative of will talk to us, the person from the Office of Climate Change, Mr. Ramon Rebello, will talk to us about in greater detail later. This office fosters projects to improve selective waste collection and to offer guidance for the clean or green points that we have. Also, our county council, just to wind up, to talk to you about our role, not only in this Congress, but also our actual field of activities, that we have an environmental education and promotion department which presented a book of environmental education. This concept of environmental education was started here in the County Council 40 years ago by a group of academics and municipal leaders, and last week we presented this manual which shows the very latest experience after 40 years of working in environmental education. Likewise, we have our network of towns and villages for sustainability, which coordinates a circular economy and waste prevention in the majority of our local authorities. So I think all of this justifies our interest in participating in this seminar and providing not only the support of Barcelona County Council, but also the Association of the Maresme, the coast here, with its waste treatment center, which is leading this Congress for the first time here in Europe, in Catalonia, and which has enabled us all to be together today here in this opening session and over the coming 2 days of the symposium. I'm sure that it will be of great use to us all. I hope you have a very happy time here and that your work proves most fruitful. Thank you very much for your attention.
Now,
to close the opening session, Mr. David Botte, who is the president of the Consortium for Urban Solid Waste Treatment of the Maresme, and the Mayor of Mataró, and the Honorary President of Relagres for this meeting.
Yo lo primero que les voy a decir es que me parece
is that I'm afraid that, I did used to look like I looked in the picture, but after, a few years as Mayor of Mataró, you can see what it's done to me. First of all, after this round, I'd like to welcome you to Mataró, our city, and I would like to do it talking about something that I've been thinking of since last week. Last week, we presented something that was very important to us all, an award, which I'm sure that the Deputy Mayor of Montevideo knows very well. The memorial to Joaquín García, very well-known Uruguayan painter who lived in Mataró for 2 years. Also, there are 2 people from Argentina here. I don't know if you know that Gasparera is also buried in Mataró. The author, the person, the composer of the Argentinian the Deputy Mayor of Montevideo said that his father is here in Barcelona, and I have a relative who's living in Santiago. When I was in Malaga, also an event organized by Malaga County Council on Urban Waste, and the taxi driver, his family, his brother, lived here in Mataró by coincidence. So what do I mean by saying all of this? That there could be a large distance in terms of kilometers, but we're not so far away from each other. I don't know if you know that with a link of 8 distance, we're all related. So, Oscar, please permit me to use the informal form of address, because in this modern world, I get the feeling that we place emphasis on that which separates us. Whereas with all of these examples, what I wanted to point out is that there are many things that bring us together. And one of the great things that does bring us together, and one of those is, as we've heard from the beginning of the presentation of this international seminar, one of the things that brings us together is what we do with our waste, how we care for this Mother Earth, and that what we do is not the problem of a town, a region, a country. It's something we have to all tackle together. To me, that's the thing about Relagres. That's why we're so happy that we in Recubat, which is the Congress that the consortium that I preside over organizes, and you also know Carlos Salesa, who is a person of world prestige. This idea of something which is a concern of us all, that it is a goal for us all, and that's why we participate in the different seminars, that's why we organize Recubat, and that's why that from the very beginning Recubat has related to Relagres and vice versa. And I would like to thank you also for the work that you've done to enable this. And that's why we've shared together with this common goal. And that's what I wanted to say as president of the consortium, that we are delighted to share with you, that we are delighted that the consortium is part of Relagres, that we appreciate the fact that Relagres has decided to come all the way here. We know that our situations are different, but we know that we do share many goals and we can learn much one from the other. And please God that this example of cooperation, of sharing, is not just limited to the area of waste management, but this fraternity that many of us have generated for centuries as a principle of society extends to other fields. And of course, I need to spend a minute, because I can see that people are looking at their phones and getting bored, that I need to speak to you as Mayor of Mataro, a town which seeks to be a capital, which seeks to stand as a landmark in different areas, one of which is solid waste, urban waste management. Tomorrow, those of you that want will have the opportunity to visit our waste treatment plant, and thus we are also proud, delighted to serve as the venue for the seminar, because it is precisely our outlook, what we seek to tackle together this, I mean, we all have our individual problems, but this is something we share. And as a mayor too, I have to say, the Mayor of Manresa has already said this, that there are many things to do in Mataro. The first of Gaudi's buildings was here. There's fantastic restaurants, great places to see. And as there is this strike in the metro in Barcelona, I recommend you that at the end of the day, you don't leave the town. I mean, for me, as mayor, this is the best town in the world. I mean, sounds a little pedantic, but there you go. At all events, such as I said at the beginning, I hope that over the next day and a half, you find a positive experience after the technical visits of the seminar. Thanks to the representatives of Relagres. Oh, there's something really important I forgot to mention. Thank you to the County Council and the Catalan Regional Government that has indeed funded to a large extent this seminar. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been possible. I trust it is of use to you, and that we do it thinking that, little by little, together, we can all succeed in changing the fate of our planet. Thank you. Small changes, common goal. We're hearing some of these headlines, which we can begin to share on the social networks, because we've used these different terms throughout these opening speeches, this need to share everything that happens here, because it is a common goal, a common project, a common situation that we're all tackling. Ladies and gentlemen, now it's time to get down to work, because we do have a challenge, a major challenge today. We'll hear from major speakers. So we're going to look at the three main challenges that we're facing and to see if we can turn around the situation we find ourselves immersed in. Change the goal of the sustainable management of waste, which is going to contribute to sustainable development and slow global warming. So the first thing, very important, diagnosis, an exhaustive diagnosis of what is out there, the different realities that we are facing, in order to delimit these great challenges and find the possible solutions. So we're going to start with our first speakers, and in this first block we're going to hear first from Mr. Attilio Savino. He is the ex-secretary of the Ministry of Health, of the Environment, Sustainable Development of Argentina, ex-chair and Latin American representative of ISVA, the largest waste management organization in the world. Mr. Savino is going to talk to us about the enormous challenges there are for the protection of health and the environment through the application of waste management systems which are sustainable. So I'm going to leave you in the hands of Mr. Attilio Savino. Let me tell you that he's making a great effort because he's got an awful cold and he's going to do everything possible to ensure the quality of his talk, and he's really making a great effort, I must assure you. Well, good morning. It's a delight to be here. Authorities, friends from Regulares, Oscar, Jaime, Carlos, Antonio, the people from Mataró, Mr. Mayor. It's a great pleasure to be back here in Spain, particularly in this well-loved city. As you said, we're starting the wheels turning now, so as has been said previously, we're going to try to paint a picture of the world situation, and I'm going to use the opening talk of our presenter when she used the metaphor of the army, and carrying on with this metaphor, each and every one of us have a battle to fight. Using the words of JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, in his inaugural speech, when he called for each and every citizen of the US, he said, "What can you give to benefit your country?" So the question is, what can we all give, each and every one of us, to seek the solutions which are increasingly urgently required, increasingly imperiously required. So I'm going to turn things round. I'm going to start by anticipating the end of my talk, because I believe that it's an eloquent summary of one of the great problems we're facing. So please, I'm going to just show you a 2-minute video, please. Could you put the video up for me, please? There are more than 50,000 open landfills in the world.
Bueno, gracias. Creo que acá de alguna manera se resume uno de nuestros grandes problemas y por eso convocamos a cada uno de nosotros a dar esta batalla. Y ahora, en el inicio de la presentación,
At the
si esto
beginning of my
funciona.
presentation, if this is working. Oh, that's it. Okay, all of my presentation is based on a publication that ISWA brought out together with the UN Environment and was presented at the end of 2015, called the Global Waste Management Outlook, that each and every one of you can access through the ISWA website. Our idea is to present the scale of the problem. 2,000 million tons per year of municipal waste, some 300 million in in urban solid waste. And this shows the basis of this enormous problem, and with our increasing generation of waste, and this obviously is related to the income level and the per capita generation of waste. The higher income is, the greater the generation of solid waste. Another phenomenon, the increasing urbanization, which is occurring worldwide, the migration of people from rural to urban communities, the increase in the per capita income, particularly in the developing countries, in the emerging economies, this concentration of people in cities, speaking, for example, of the continent that I come from, the Latin American continent, over 80% of Latin American people live in cities. And in my country, in Argentina, over 90% of our population lives in cities. This growing phenomenon of these megalopolies, which in general are vulnerable to the effects of climate change because they tend to be in areas which could easily be flooded, and which, if the increase of the climate, of temperature, continues, are likely to be flooded. It's undeniable, and without going into any kind of sociological analysis, our modern society is characterized by a high level of consumption. We are a consumer society, not only to consume to satisfy our basic needs, but to make consumption part of our society. McKinsey carried out a survey, an important survey, not only on the scale of consumption, but also on the speed of it, the number of people that are gaining access to material goods. This study shows how much time went by before 50 million people could access a given good. So 30 years for these people, 38 years for them to have a radio, 13 to have a TV, 3 to obtain access to internet, 1 year, so that more than 50 million people were on Facebook, and 8 months before the same number of people were on Twitter. This is an eloquent discourse on what is happening with the digital age and how each era has its specificity in terms of the currents of waste generation. Proof of the flow of waste, particularly that of electrical and electronic devices. In Latin America, by 2025, we expect to see an increase in such waste of over 60%. Now, let's speak directly of the basic circumstances that characterize waste management. And this is of how we satisfactorily collect this waste. And if in the developed country there's been a significant increase in this, the goal would be for 100% of waste to be collected. This is closely related to issues of public health. But just to give you a specific example, in Latin America, which is a subcontinent in which waste collection achieves significant levels, over 93% of waste is collected, and this means that we are on a similar level to the developed countries. And even despite this high percentage, 41 million people in Latin America are not covered by the service, waste collection service. And of course, these are the most vulnerable people who live in the most depressed situations of poverty. Okay, we looked at this at the beginning, the basic trays of the final disposal of waste. And here we do not have reliable figures, but we are aware of the scale of the problem. Over 3 billion people worldwide are living in places close to uncontrolled landfills, waste disposal areas. Let me just give you another example from Latin America. 160 million tons per day inadequately disposed of, meaning that 150 million people are exposed to the consequences of this. And that's why it is a battle for us all to fight. Obviously, all of this has a consequence. The most immediate consequence is the health and environmental risks involved. The contamination of the soil, but also of flora and fauna, are a consequence of uncontrolled dumping of waste. The cost of inaction is at least between 5 and 10 times greater than an adequate waste management service would cost. So all of this has a financial cost, and this is obviously one of the trays that should be a focus of concern for us, how to finance such systems. And this is something which in the developing world is one of the great problems, to the extent to which waste management is not considered as a public service and not seen as being something that each of us should finance. We've already heard a little about how we are going to transform this situation, the possibilities of the famous 3 R's, to reduce, reuse and recycle, to focus our management program on the prevention of the generation of waste. Of course, the backbone of this system will be in recycling, as we all know that in developing countries this is at a very low level. None of the developing countries are capable of recycling more than 20% of the waste generated, and this also means that there's a large informal sector which should actually form part of a more formal structure in so doing. What measures should be taken? What are the solutions? To focus now, straight away, on generating adequate solutions for management to tend to develop adequate sites for the final disposal, to extend waste collection services to cover 100% of the population. On the other hand, to control hazardous waste. This is one of the features of our modern world. The transfer of manufacturing facilities to the developing countries means that these countries are now generating such hazardous waste, but unfortunately do not have adequate waste treatment plants to deal with them, and where, on the other hand, oftentimes they need to export such hazardous waste with all of the issues, for example, which are related to the Basel Convention on the transport of hazardous waste. The change of paradigm that Oscar was talking about is to go into a circular economy. A circular economy which could be summed up in the concept that we represent or copy a biological organism, creating an industrial organism where each product is designed to have a second life as a raw material, and thus contribute to reducing the pressure on our natural resources, to generate less greenhouse gas, and also to see the possibility of energy generation. Obviously, we need to focus on preventing the generation of waste. We need to establish adequate recycling systems, but at the same time to have the courage to know that recycling is limited. And let's remember what the second law of thermodynamics says, that the permanent generation of entropy is that there's not the possibility of 100% recycling, and so we need to establish different goals amounts for each waste current, being aware of how to treat differently each of the products, what their composition is, and to understand from the outset what the options are for the processing of the different hazardous waste generated, when unavoidably we have to design a final waste disposal site. It should be used to capture biogas for energy production, because otherwise all we're going to do is negatively impact climate change, meaning that the decomposition is going to generate methane, which we all are aware of is more polluting than carbon dioxide. So how should we do this? How do we achieve it? First of all, we need to understand that waste management, solid waste management, is an eminently complex issue and has to be looked at from the different aspects involved, from the point of view of our institutions, which have to generate an adequate level of participation from the community. We need to establish clear strategic goals, and all of this, meetings such as this with the different communiques that can be put out, we have to call continuously for a political commitment and the definition of coherent, permanent, applicable policies, so that there is no debate in the political arena depending on the color of the people in power. We need a definitive solution. Obviously, we need to understand what we said at the beginning, that there is an informal sector which needs to be borne in mind and needs to be integrated into our regular practices. The governance of the system is clear, fundamental. In a recent study on the different traits of the developing countries, one was the improvement of governance, and the first point that should be considered is that, in terms of improving the systems, the framework laws, strategies, national master plans must be coordinated to seek to achieve these goals. We need to avoid duplication in our systems at different levels of government to ensure that each and every level is aware of its own particular responsibility in terms of putting into place solutions. Obviously, as we said before, we need to look at financial aspects. We need to be aware of the cost. We need to identify the different costs to ensure that they are adequately covered with well-calculated taxes. We need to clearly define how the financial system should work hand in hand with us, and we shouldn't think that there is just one solution that suits all. We need to look for different individual solutions to ensure that the cost involved in waste management is recovered. It needs to be tailored. And of course, I believe that the first thing that one finds when you start to investigate the situation is that there is not any data available, adequate statistics, to be used to design public policy, to take corrective measures, and of course, this can only be done with adequate transparency by seeking and finding the systematization of this data. And also, what is very useful is to compare things that are done in different places to serve as a system of benchmarking for this activity. Most heads of state and government have concluded that the Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 are going to generate adequate solutions. More than half of the Sustainable Development Goals could be met by measures which involve good practices in terms of solid waste management. This then speaks to us, as I said before, of the importance of a sector which, with climate change, even though it's true that it's only making a marginal contribution, at the moment there is a paradigmatic example, which is that of the commitments of the European Union for 2020, almost 20% of them will be met through adequate waste management. One of the important aspects of these goals is the well-marked question of the problem of food waste and the scale of it. Over 13 billion tons of food are wasted, and this has to be dealt with specifically in each and every country. In the developed countries, this waste occurs in consumption. On the other hand, in the developing countries, most waste occurs in the production chain, and thus an important policy experience in terms of biodegradable food waste, and we need to find the right policies in order to resolve these issues. Thank you very much, and I would be delighted to field any questions you may have for me. Thank you very much, and a very good day to you all. Okay, so Mr. Sabino, would you like to take a seat? We're going to try and be as quick as possible because we're already running late. It's a bit difficult. So later on, we're going to have an occasion to have a discussion. Now we're going to hear from Mr. Alfredo Ream. He is a specialist, a consultant in water and solid waste management in the private and public world. He's an academic at the University of Santiago de Chile. He also works together with the Inter-American Development Bank and as a government consultant in terms of the development of Latin America and the Caribbean, which is part of the Inter-American Development Bank. He's going to talk about the priorities of the bank through its development priorities. So, Mr. Rim, the floor is yours, sir.
Hola a todos. Buenos días. Muchas gracias por la invitación.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the invitation. I hope you can all hear me. So, I'm going to talk about the solid waste situation in Latin America. There are a lot of waste management experts here, so you already know a lot of what I'm going to say, but I want to take this sort of macro global vision of the IDB, looking at the challenges that we have, also the future, some general food for thought on historical problems and things that we can avoid in the future. So, a little introduction. I'm from Chile. I'm a civil engineer. I've always been a waste management expert. I've always worked in Chile. Until a few years ago, I went to Washington. Some nice pictures of Washington for you. Here's the bank's building there. It's about 4 blocks away from the White House, which I don't know if that's a good place to be in right now or not. But that's where it is. Right in the midst of things. From Chile, I went to the US to coordinate the bank's solid waste management projects. And the bank works throughout Latin America and also a good part of the Caribbean as well. And that's really the area that I'm going to be telling you about. The bank so then works throughout the region. It has a raft of interventions from soft, hard, management systems, diagnosis, infrastructure, construction, collection, and so on. I come from the public sector, which is basically support for governments and cities, but the bank also works with the private sector and operations linked to country development. No, the IDBs, World Bank, and other multilateral body solutions aren't a sort of one size fits all, saying this is the best technology or this is the best way to do things, but rather they're more holistic and seek the most adequate solution for each specific situation. They don't always say, this is right or this is wrong, then, but rather look at which solution fits best where. So, some of the knowledge products that we have, I'm just showing you a sample of this. The website of the bank also has information on these products. This orange book that you see in the middle is our regional assessment report of solid urban waste. Hopefully that'll be finalized next year. And that was drawn up every 10 years. It's a health agency initiative. The IDB has been working with them recently, but there's been so many changes in the region. There's been faster changes in recent years, and so it's a good indicator of what's happening at the moment. Another publication that's available is something we did for solid waste, but this is the most recent, which is a diagnosis of recycling in the region. And I think that was just published 2 weeks ago in The Economist, in partnership with The Economist. So let me now move on to the situation in Latin America. Now, I know that there are many colleagues here who are expert in the area, but I just want to give you a couple of stats and pictures before moving on to our own situation. In the continent, I think if we had to sum it up, we'd say that it's kind of adolescent system. It's not as developed as systems like European, probably, and some Asian countries. But at the same time, it's further forward than others. Countries. So there is a contrast. We do have works that are cutting edge in various spheres, that are operating well in several cities, like this one, treatment system of organic and other materials, and this is quite cutting edge. And then you have that at the same time as a situation like this, which unfortunately many of you have seen in your own countries. We have quite technical systems and some sophisticated ones, and then we also have simple systems which are also optimized from the point of view of the health perspective. But they're not. Here you see uncontrolled dumps, informal recycling systems, and Atilio's video was very clear on that. And obviously in Latin America, unlike Europe, recycling is very much linked to the informal sector. There's about 4 million, more or less, very approximately, estimated to work in recycling sector. And there are also more extreme systems, which I'm going to show you. I'm going to come back to. This is Haiti. A circular economy systems also, where from some point of view it's perfect and others it's very complicated. On the more positive side, there are also initiatives and progress being made in waste management, though. Not necessarily just from the logistical or transport of waste side, but recovery of waste. And what we're seeing in the circular economy, focusing more on prevention. This is a center in Argentina. This is in Buenos Aires. You can see these smart containers, which give you different options and visions on where we might move forward in the future with participation of population as well. Now, recent changes in legislation particularly, as I said before, we've got declaration systems. There are networks in Chile, in Argentina, an observatory is being created. So there are things going on which would suggest that there's a positive movement in this regard. Because of basically overflow in many places, cities have grown and now sprawling, and waste is a serious issue that cannot be avoided. We must tackle it. And we need to go beyond an initial, simple, quick fix solution to more planning. And this is where we have planned and comprehensive management of solid waste coming in. Some figures, I hope I don't offend anyone with these figures, but I think they will coincide more or less with the figures that you have. But this is what we have in per capita waste generation. Some say it's around 1 kilo per inhabitant per year. Some say 0.6, 0.9. Waste collection, figures aren't all bad, even compared to the rest of the world. You've got the 89.9% with world average of 73.6%. But what we're now moving through is to separate waste collection, and that's still low. Real systems, however, are lacking in we've got separate waste collection, which is just starting, and coverage of final disposal service has improved a lot, but still has a long way to go. We don't just want to have a final disposal system, but rather to have a system that's a sort of minimum baseline. When we've got that, then anything else on top of that will always be an improvement. So this is the frequency of waste collection broken down by cities and places. This is the Clean Points network building, Chile, a more sophisticated waste collection systems in areas where it's difficult geographically. Or in the case of Santiago, there are particular targets for specific waste collection in certain areas. Methods of final disposal. Obviously, central landfill is in counterpart to controlled dump sites. Here you've got distribution in other parts of Latin America. Cost of final disposal, which varies according to the quality of the service and how transparent it is and the cost actually covers. Now, the problem is who and how covers these costs. From the point of view of system sustainability, as Atilio said, you need transparency there, but often sustainability. This costs money and resources, and these systems have to be maintained, and therefore they need to be financed. This shows cost recovery and the evolution of traditional cost recovery and how that's moved forward. Ways of raising funds. In Chile, I remember going back quite a while, we did an analysis of how much was raised and how much was actually taken, or the potential funds was X, which actually wasn't enough to cover the cost of the system. And even with that deficit, the city wasn't getting as much financing as it could have been. So there was flaws in the system. Recycling. Now, the bank has these figures from official sources. We thought there was quite a bit more recycling actually going on. The issue is basically on how information is quantified and presented and the formal and informal parts of the system. And they often overlap with other flows. There's been work carried on the interaction between urban and industrial waste. And from the macro perspective, certain amounts of material are recycled that aren't reflected in the figures. Now, again, as I've said, the informal sector is very important. That's the case in our continent and others similar. Much of what is recovered comes from the informal sector. And the second important point is that they also handle information. They're probably, these informal waste collectors are probably the best sources of information on what is actually going on. This shows you cities' development in terms of recycling. We've got cities that have better regulations, better investment, and better systems. You can see it's not a judgment, it's just an empirical reflection of the actual situation. This, in terms of energy in solid waste management, in the region, if we talk about biogas recovery, we then have to talk about energies and differential energy flows. We've got different breakdowns, incinerators, plasma and other systems. Some places you don't have any infrastructure, and then there are areas like Martinique and the Caribbean where they have very specific conditions, and they're not Latin American or Caribbean government models, but rather European. This is San Andres, which I think is the only plant that exists that's not actually in operation. In City of Mexico, this came out recently, the first big waste treatment plant in Latin America. I think it was saying 600,000 tons a day would be treated there. And when this is the type of thing you get in the news, it was published about a month ago. What's important here is the impact on this type of works on the system that's currently being used. Mexico City is very specific in its waste collection. It's not exactly regular, the system. Payment is practically by tips almost. And then you get a plant like this built, which will have an impact on the city and on other systems that work in the city. Now, this is what you'll see, world trends in solid waste management. Obviously, it's not about following the trend, but doing the best thing for each specific place. A couple more slides before looking at Latin America, before I finish. This is on Chile, and from recycling point of view, I think this is interesting. People who recycle weekly, why people don't recycle. And in Santiago, when people are asked why they don't recycle, they say, well, they didn't think about it. They didn't think it was necessary. Often it's because they don't have somewhere to put the recycling, or they're just not used to it. It's not something that they do. So this is good information to move forward. We need more education. It needs to be easier for people to take their recycling. They need more information on the benefits of it. Now, this shows the circular economy. Now, this is important when it comes to the figures. Political discourse sometimes puts figures that aren't always realistic, and this shows what we can actually achieve. Other flows, hazardous waste, industrial waste, hospital waste, obviously those are important as well. Not always linked to urban waste, but are within cities sometimes. So, 5 or 6 minutes just to show you some photos and give some food for thought. I'm not a photographer, but I've been told this is a very good photo, and it certainly is quite dramatic. These are informal recyclers in Puerto Príncipe, Port-au-Prince. Just as some things that we've seen from the bank. They're not all our operations, but I'd also like to make some reflections on other aspects. In Chalapa, in Mexico, they've got a good system, a collection system. It's all good. It's quite balanced. They got financing and they managed to make improvements. From the bank's point of view, this is good. The bank is working on this. And the bank is fortunate to be able to intervene, which often it's just a recovery, what the bank does. This was an optimization, and it was difficult in that sense. But what's important is the progress this makes. When they have a basic issue that's more or less resolved, a place to dump rubbish, they start building these using other means, not necessarily using the sexiest technology, but useful technology. Biodigesters, here's what you have. And you can see here the bottom, how the system works. Another important system, a scheme in Mexico, which we'd see across Latin America, is how to optimize a system, how to group together with others. In Mexico, they have operator bodies, which are known here as consortiums, and basically they group together different cities to manage waste management together. Political acceptance of this is more difficult, however, and often that means that they don't end up coming off. Now, this is a landfill in Belize. I'm just showing this because what happened was a technically committed unit achieved the right result. It was quite a fragile system there in Belize, and they don't charge for waste collection. It's almost bankrupt, the system, and it's quite fragile. And basically, we brought up this cost recovery system. Another issue here, classic bank intervention in Belize again, with recyclers and training. If you've worked with an institution like the IDB, I'm sure you'll be aware of this. You see the cause, you see this is something that we have to work with. There are these informal recyclers, and we have to look at how we can incorporate them in the system or how to change them into another system when we're planning this type of operation. This is a post-earthquake picture that was from 2010. Is anybody from Haiti here? Before I go on, I can't see. Nobody from Haiti? Before I make any comments, I just wanted to know. This is the poorest country in the region when it comes to planning and resources. It's the weakest. This is what happened after the earthquake. These huge dumps, you see, these huge landfills were filled. And with this, much of this material disappeared very quickly. Because people are poor, they have a different concept of reuse, and much of this material disappeared from this system. This is an industrial park that was built in North Haiti. There was hazardous waste there. We tried to work on that with clean management. This is the practice in a country where you don't have anything. There's no place to put hazardous waste. And obviously, you have to solve all material flows when you're planning a system like this. This is a more extreme case. This is in northern Haiti. It's the second biggest city. And what you see there is a mangrove there, right overlapping with landfill. The official population figures aren't known, so it's estimated to be 80,000 to 100,000. But what you're seeing is this overlap with the mangrove and landfill, and that's causing a huge problem to solve. Now, this is an interesting photo, something I added, and I'm drawing to a close in a moment. This is a drone. What we didn't, as I said, we don't know the population figure, so we tried to calculate population using this drone. So I use this as an example. There are a series of remote technologies, or remote information gathering technologies that we can use to improve operations in the future. This is the photo that I showed you at the start. It's coming back to the landfill. It's not a very elegant solution, but it does work. And they don't have very much rubbish because houses don't throw away much rubbish. Very poor people reuse materials far more than we do, and we're millionaires compared to them. And what you see is those little pigs that go eating up all of the organic waste that there is, any left over. And people who live there recycle everything else. With the rest of rubbish, a machine comes and compacts it, and then they use it for building. People can build housing. So actually, the system works very well. Inherently, there's something sort of wrong with it, but it is balanced. A colleague from the bank did a study saying that about 50 to 20% of the city's GDP comes from this. The bank is taking a conventional approach to this with sanitary landfill. Is that the right answer, though? That's a more complex question. Now, in Haiti, you don't have a capacity to maintain system. There isn't public collection. There isn't a plant, and they accumulate materials and they pile up. This is an extreme case, but it does happen in other countries. Often, equipment, giving countries equipment, it poses a problem in itself. It then has to be maintained and repaired, and they can't necessarily do that. Here you've got cost recovery systems there. They realized that people wouldn't follow this model, however, because of customs and capacity. This circular economy isn't exclusive. In Jamaica and other Caribbean countries, you've got similar systems. This is the entry into Georgetown, and there's about 5 or 6 full blocks of animals there in the city, and what goes out of there goes straight into the water. In Brazil, they say they've got the biggest landfill site, or the second biggest landfill site in the world. It's Brasilia here. What's interesting of Brazil, just to show technology, you've got a landfill side by side with, they have a national waste act, and that reinforcing treatment. You've got composting system on the green side working. They have also other things that are interesting for you to have on your radar, maybe landfill reclamation, which is and urban mining is also very important there. In technological terms, we've got a landfill that competes with these. We've got the two systems coexisting side by side, and they're experimenting with drone monitoring here. So you've got kind of online, real-time information. You don't have to carry out traditional visits, but rather you have ongoing monitoring of the system. Another problem in cities is access to collection points. This is El Salvador. They're planning mechanisms to solve access using carts. And also you have these green points where people can leave things that can be recycled, and they're looking at how that will help. And Bolivia, it's not just a waste management problem. You've got solid waste, different types of waste. You've got a basin here, so it's a very cross-cutting issue that we're working on. Guyana. This is a case where the operator wasn't good and the operation was a disaster. They had low resources, the same payments, the same institutional capacity. The operator wasn't good. The operator didn't seek to learn anything. So it's sort of next door to Belize. But if you have city councils that want to operate a system, if you have the right technical capacity, and you have to look at whether those operators are going to be able to deal with them. Ecuador, you've got different types of municipal association. They work when they have clear legal system. You've got in Ecuador different systems working, and that's obviously going to complicate the whole matter. Galapagos, just to show you this, another type of material, marine litter and plastic debris, that's obviously very relevant, and that's a plankton that eats plastic. We eat the fish that eats the plankton, we're therefore eating plastic. Use of materials, that's a challenge. We can't stigmatize plastic. Of course, it has its pros, but it also has its cons. But I think the most important lesson here is that the impact of waste isn't always clear. In Washington, you see in rainwater collection shows that the rainwater goes onto the floor, and if you throw waste in one place, you don't necessarily know that it's going to damage an animal further down the line in the sea. Colombian model, I know we'll be talking about that tomorrow. It's very interesting to follow, especially in terms of cooperatives and recyclable bags in Bogota. Argentina, probably one of the most developed countries, and certainly Buenos Aires, with separate waste collection, dry fractions and wet fractions. Obviously, they've had teething problems as well there. But again, this is another system example from Buenos Aires of recycling bins. Probably a good example to follow in the future. They're kind of these smart containers that speak to you, that have voice messages, and it can explain how it works. So, not all is good in Argentina. This is a problem where the city didn't have any resources to solve landfill. Investment is just one thing, operational capacity is another, and here you can see the outcome. Chile, technically Easter Islands, you see here, and here we're facing new issues again. We had the Zika virus outbreak, and a protocol had to be drawn up. So it's a dynamic perspective, looking at conditions and situations that are continuously changing and throwing up new challenges. Fire in Valparaiso, waste management problem partially, poor collection, in extreme climate conditions, just to link up to climate change there. These are the damaging effects that can have. Planning to close on Haiti, works have to be rooted in the local environment. You can have earthquakes, for example. In Chile we had that, so we have to take that into account in everything we do. And last but not least, just a couple of future trends. We're always open to new technologies. These are solar panels. It's just starting to be studied. Waste flows. There are specific waste flows that are going to be increasingly specific in the future. Food waste is one. Latin America, compared to other regions, for them this is probably less relevant. It's less linked to food waste. What you see at the bottom symbolizes specific materials that have to be taken into coordination, rubber ducks and pipes. urban the relationships, complaints, monitoring systems, how we work with the public. Probably that's going to be very important in the future, and the way in which systems are monitored by beneficiaries. That's all. Thank you very much.
Very much, Mr. Rim. Now I'm going to insist, please, on trying to stick as closely as possible to your time because we are running a little late. It's important for us to keep to our time, so we're going to close this first block with Mr. Julius Langendorf. He is the director of the Waste and Secondary Waste Management from the European Commission, and with him we're going to look at this, what is being done in Europe and on the negotiations to achieve these ambitious goals in terms of the circular economy, which is going to determine the future of the Union. So, Mr. Julius Langendorf, sir, the floor is yours.
Muchas gracias y buenos días. Les voy a obligar a hacer un poco de deporte, coger auriculares.
Much we're going to do a bit of sport. Please pick up your headsets because I'm going to speak in English. I'm Dutch. I speak fairly good Spanish, but I can't give a technical presentation in Spanish. So if you need it, please do pick up your headsets to listen to the translation. Thank you.
What I would try to do, and it's a bit challenging in a short period of time, is to give you a very quick overview about what we're doing in the European Union, that is 28 member states, 500 million people, to improve waste management. And of course, for the Latin American colleagues in the room, we don't have the notion that all of this can be copied one-to-one to another continent, to Latin America, but I think there are lessons to be learned from the experiences that we have made in Europe over the past 40 years, because the first EU-wide legislation on waste, and this is legislation that is binding on all the 28 member states, dates from 1975. So it is a long experience. What I wanted to do is give you a very quick flavor, nothing more, of the Circular Economy Action Plan that we're currently implementing at the European level. And then to say a few words about the European waste legislation, its main objectives, and also the way it's implemented in the 28 member states. To start with the Circular Economy Action Plan, we adopted at the European level a Circular Economy Action Plan in 2015. And clearly, circular economy is a much wider concept than waste or recycling. It is about, first of all, reducing the input into the economic system, the input of material and energy resources. So it's about more efficient production processes, for example, but it can also be about renewable energy. Then it is about maintaining the value of products and materials within the cycle. That's all about reuse, repair, remanufacturing. And then, and this is where the waste dimension comes in, it is about reducing the leakage. That's about recycling and partly also about energy recovery. But clearly it's a concept much wider than simply looking at waste management for us. For us at the European level, this is clearly something that is much wider than just an environmental agenda. It's an economic agenda, it's an innovation agenda. It is also, very importantly, a climate change agenda, and it is a job creation agenda. We did some studies, just to give you one figure, on the amounts of jobs that can be created through better waste management, and for the EU as a whole, the 28 member states, the figure that we came up with is that some 500,000 new jobs can be created over the next 20 years if we improve waste management along the lines of what we have in our current legislation and will be in the future legislation that we're currently reviewing. All of this can be found online. The Circular Economy Action Plan that we adopted about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and a first report on its implementation. Just to give you a few examples of the actions that we're taking at the European level, very important, of course, the whole issue of eco-design, ensure better design of products so that they have a longer life, that they can be repaired more easily, they're fit for reuse and recycling. There is an eco-design work program that we adopted some time ago where these aspects are factored in. We are also working on food waste, very important priority as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which ask us to have food waste by 2030. There is very important action going on in that area. We are developing a strategy on plastics, which will be about better recycling of plastics, design for recycling. It will be about marine litter, and that is a strategy that should come out by the end of this year. And we are also looking at the linkages between chemicals, product and waste policy, another strategy in the making. Now, let's have a look at the EU waste legislation, the main pieces that we have. And as I said, this is binding legislation for all 28 member states. So if we talk about the waste policy of Mataró or Barcelona or Spain or any other country, this is to a large extent driven by EU waste legislation. Over the past 40 years, we've developed a vast body of waste legislation. The most important piece of it is the Waste Framework Directive. It was first adopted in 1975 and has been reviewed a number of times. The current directive dates from 2008. Another important piece of legislation is the Landfill Directive, which essentially is about ensuring that landfills are sanitary, are subject to permitting conditions, and contains another series of elements. Now, just to maybe highlight what for us are the key elements of the Waste Framework Directive, of course, it is, and that was the initial objective, to ensure that waste is managed without endangering the environment and public health. But over the years, the resource dimension of the directive has gained increasing importance. So the circular economy dimension of it, next to the environment and public health dimension, has become more important. As part of the Waste Framework Directive, the waste hierarchy, and we've of course already seen reference to it, is a legally binding concept and drives all we do in Europe to improve waste management. So prevention, reuse, recycling as the first priorities. Energy recovery has a role to play, but should be handled with care. Of course, in Latin America, we saw the presentation by Mr. Rim. There is very little incineration capacity, so you have a completely different picture there. But in Europe, some countries have clearly created overcapacities that undermine the higher tiers of the waste hierarchy. And in terms of landfilling, of course, disposal being the least preferred option, we do all we can to reduce landfilling to a minimum. Very important to achieve better recycling are separate collection obligations. So not just collection, but separate collection, and we're pushing member states to improve their separate collection of the dry materials of municipal waste, but increasingly also the biodegradable fraction, the bio-waste, is also increasingly subject to separate collection. And in 2008, we introduced the first binding recycling targets for municipal waste. All member states, in 4 years' time, by the end of 2020, have to recycle 50% of all their household and similar waste, so roughly their municipal waste. And we are pushing very hard to make sure that member states achieve that. Then another important part of the Waste Framework Directive is the polluter pays principle. Cost of waste management have to be paid by somebody. There are always costs. Who is going to pay for it? It's either the waste producer, or in some cases the waste holder, or the producer of the products through extended producer responsibility schemes, which are in Europe a very important part of the picture. The landfill directive, essentially it sets the conditions to approve landfills, to have them subject to permitting requirements, but also, very important part of the landfill directive is the climate change dimension, reducing biodegradable waste sent to landfills to 35% of the 95 amounts in 2016, that was last year, and also to make sure that any biodegradable waste that is landfilled still is subject to adequate treatment, which for biodegradable means that it is stabilized. We're currently going through a review of the targets. What we try to do is to create a perspective for 2025 and 2030, having more ambitious recycling targets, creating a perspective for investors, and having a greater contribution to the circular economy. And in the Commission, proposals that are subject to discussions between the European Parliament and Member States currently, and we hope to achieve agreement by the end of this year. We propose that in 2030 all Member States should recycle 65% of their municipal waste and reduce landfilling of that waste to a maximum of 10% again in 2030. These are quite ambitious objectives for a number of member states, for others less so, but there are quite big differences in Europe, and some member states, of course, are telling us that this is too ambitious, this will come at too high cost, but this is the discussion that we're currently having. Also, as part of that proposals, and something that is very important for us, is the use of economic instruments, use incineration, landfill taxes to move waste to the higher steps in the waste hierarchy, use, where possible, pay-as-you-throw schemes so that consumers pay according to the residual waste that they produce, and also use extended producer responsibility schemes where producers pay fees for the amounts of products they put on the market, for example, packaging. Now, what is the real situation? This is the legislation. What is the real situation in Europe? Let's just have another look at this overview of the situation. And what you can see here is that the green bars represent recycling and composting. You see that a number of member states, Germany, Austria, but also Slovenia, Belgium, Netherlands, have recycling rates already well above 50%, but at the same time they have quite high incineration rates. At the other side, there are member states that still landfill 80–90% of all their waste, have hardly any recycling, and some of those countries have a little bit of waste incineration. If you look at Spain in the middle, recycling rate is some 33%, I think, but still more than half the waste in Spain is landfilled. So clearly there is still, for countries like Spain, a long way to go to achieve the 50% recycling by 2020, and certainly to move beyond that in the period up to 2030. Now, part of the job of the European Commission is to improve implementation on the ground. We do that in some cases by taking legal action against member states, going to European Court of Justice. For example, in the case of illegal landfills, where there really is a very acute problem of environmental and public health, but in many cases also through policy advice and dialogue. And the type of recommendation, I think these are recommendations that are certainly also useful for the Latin American colleagues in the room, that we make. I've tried to summarize. Of course, we make tailor-made recommendations for individual member states, but if you look at the overall picture, of course, the importance of waste management plans that are based on facts and figures. That's an important part. National, regional, and local. Step up efforts to promote waste prevention. There's quite a wide divergence within the European Union, with member states producing some 700 kilos of municipal waste per capita per annum, and others only 250, the lowest. So there clearly is there's a lot to learn from the better practices, but it's also often related to economic growth. Improve, and that's really the cornerstone of what we do, improve separate collection of the dry fraction, but also, as I said, increasingly of bio-waste, and make use of economic instruments, without which we feel none of this can be achieved. Make sure that fees are used to finance waste infrastructure, use landfill taxes, incineration taxes, use pay-as-you-throw schemes, and make use of extended producer responsibility schemes. An important part of our efforts is also to make sure that where European funds are available for waste infrastructure, they are used in the smartest way and with a forward-looking strategy. What we've seen in the past is that a lot of landfilling capacity was financed, a lot of mechanical biological treatment capacity was financed, but these are models based on unsorted waste, residual waste, whereas, of course, in an ideal situation, much more would be invested in separate collection of waste, sorting, recycling facilities, reuse and prevention. So that is another struggle that we have with member states, to make sure that they do not go for the easier solutions, but think long term and go for the smarter solutions that will deliver in the long term. Now, if you look around, and I think, again, this is useful to the extent you have time to look at these, there are many good practices in the European Union, not just in the north, but also in other parts. I've just listed a few of those examples. Ljubljana, Slovenia, is one of the new member states, joined 10 years ago, has achieved, in terms of the capitals in the European Union, the best separate collection among those capitals. So in a relatively short period of time, they have been able to move to very successful separate collection. The Walloon region in the south of Belgium has very good experiences with use of economic instruments. Parts of Italy, not just the rural areas, but also major urban conglomerations. Milano has very good bio-waste collection and treatment systems. It's often said that high recycling rates, good separate collection, come with high costs. There are examples, again, in Italy, in the north of Italy, that shows that if cleverly designed, you can combine high recycling rates, good separate collection, with low fees. That province of Treviso has the lowest fees in the entire country in Italy. So that clearly shows that if you design your system cleverly, it can be done, and high recycling rates can be achieved at a lower cost. The issue of the mechanical biological treatment, which of course is needed, but it serves only the non-sorted, the indifferentiated waste. And in some countries, the experience has been that there has been an overcapacity. This undermines separate collection, produces low-quality compost, and this is something where France has concluded that there will be no more public support for the creation of additional MBT capacity. Another lesson that I think is also relevant for other countries. And debates in a number of member states about the optimal capacity for incineration. Many member states in the north have overcapacities, incinerate still half of their municipal waste, which clearly is not compatible with recycling rates that are above 60%. So in those member states, but also other member states that are considering extending their incineration capacity, we tell them that they should be cautious and learn from the mistakes made in other member states. There are many more of such examples, and as I said, if you look across the entire EU, you will see that you have good practice examples almost in every member state. It's not just in the north, but at the local and regional level. Certainly other member states can also serve as examples. This is a lot of information in a short time. You can find more online. We are happy, of course, also to answer any further questions. I think in the European experience, the past 40 years, the past 20 years, there is a lot that can be learned in terms of good practices, in terms of lessons learned from less good practices. But of course, we realize that what makes the EU experience quite unique is that we have common legislation for 28 member states, which of course is not the case in Latin America. Nevertheless, I think it's worth having a look at our experiences. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, Julius Langerdorf, Atilio Sabino, el señor Alfredo Rin. Es cierto que vamos muy justos de tiempo, pero vamos a permitir al menos que una pregunta del auditorio, si hay alguien que está especialmente interesado en dirigirse a nuestros tres ponentes o alguno de ellos.
Bit behind time, but if anybody wants to ask a question to our speakers, we will give you the opportunity before having a break. If anybody wants to ask a brief question, we're going to put the lights up in a moment. Does anybody wish to ask a question? I'm sure there are many questions that have arisen, these 50 uncontrolled landfill dumps, which really desperately need to be closed down. Obviously, the legislation that is being worked on in Europe, the circular economy. We have a question there at the back, I think. Anybody else? And can we have a microphone for the delegate, please? Okay, you have the floor, sir.
It's a question from Mr. Angerlo.
I have a...
And it's a question with, let's say, four parts. Okay.
Tengo una pregunta en 4 partes.
Let's imagine
Primero,
that finally we have homogenized the waste definitions and the accounting systems. Okay? I don't remember you said when this is going to be done. Then we will find that some figures will probably slightly move, but the schemes as they are, and we are going to find that there are southern countries with impressive capacity of MBT and northern countries with impressive capacity of waste to energy. Then, in respect to the MBT, it is going to be promoted the use of the stabilized organic matter as organic fertilizer, or the European Union is going to be against this application. In respect to the waste to energy, you have talking about to take care about the capacity of these kind of installations. But it's clear, the northern countries has, I think yours probably have, Netherlands, overcapacity, okay? And southern countries, we don't have. So it's going to be promoted the transfer of waste from southern countries to northern countries, or is going to be promoted that every country should have, let's say, solution in the vicinity. And the final question is about tax. You have talking about taxation of landfilling and incineration. When you are talking about incineration taxes, are you thinking in purely incineration? Is a disposal operation denied in the European directive? Or are you talking also in waste to energy? And in this case, this taxation should be at the same level that landfills, or it could be in a lower level that is higher in the hierarchy.
Langendorf. Disculpe. Adelante.
Sorry, I was trying to see where I couldn't see where you... There you are. Sorry, it just makes it easier. The way I understood your first question was about the waste definition. So what we are currently doing is negotiating with the European Parliament and the member states, and we've just started. There's no good negotiations, and we hope to finalize them by the end of this year. We will have to agree with Council, member states and Parliament on the shape of this new waste legislation, the review of the Waste Framework Directive, Packaging Directive and Landfill Directive by the end of this year. So that will include an agreement on the definition of municipal waste, that has been an important part of the discussions. What is municipal waste? Is it only household waste, essentially? I simplify a little bit. Or does it also include parts of commercial waste? And that discussion is still ongoing, but will be finalized by the end of this year, together with the entire package, the legislative package. So we hope by the end of this year to have agreed new legislation, including, obviously, the definitions, of which the municipal waste definition is an important one. In terms of the, your second question was about whether the output of mechanical biological treatment can be counted against the recycling targets. At least that's the way I understood it. And again, this is a discussion that we are having in countries with an important MBT capacity, so with less developed separate collection schemes where mixed waste goes for treatment into mechanical biological treatment infrastructure. The output of the biological treatment results in compost-like material with, in most cases, lower quality compared to biodegradable waste that is separately collected. The Parliament has raised this issue, and we will still have to debate with Parliament to what extent this output of biological treatment can continue to be counted against the recycling targets. Currently that is possible, provided there are national standards, but clearly there have also been concerns about the quality of the output, the contents of contaminants in the output. So this is an issue that will have to be discussed with the Parliament and the member states. In terms of whether the transfer of waste to other member states will be promoted or allowed, and let's just focus on the issue of waste incineration. In our waste to energy communication that we published in January this year, so where we gave guidance to member states about how to go about their waste to energy capacity planning, essentially, and the way in which countries with overcapacity should address those overcapacities, countries that are planning further incineration capacity should go about that. We are saying that in some cases it may be perfectly legitimate to rely on capacities in neighboring countries. So that in your planning, do I want to extend expensive incineration capacity, look at potential overcapacities in neighboring countries. Take the example of the Baltics. We're having quite extensive discussions with countries like Lithuania, whether or not they should build a third incinerator or not. And then it's perfectly legitimate to see whether in the same region, Estonia has extensive incineration capacity, there would not be an opportunity, a possibility to ship some of that waste for incineration in a neighboring country, in this case Estonia. I'm not saying it's possible, but these are clearly elements that should be taken into account. It happens between the Netherlands and the UK. It happens between Germany and UK. We think that these are things that should be looked at when you decide about further investments in waste incinerators. So we're certainly not against that as such. We think that it should be looked at. Whether this should be done from Greece to Sweden on a long-term basis, that is another matter. That may not be the right approach. If there are very long distances, then clearly there are questions about the overall environmental impacts of the operation. But in some cases it can make sense. In terms of the taxation of landfilling and incineration, in the end, of course, this is for member states to decide. This is not something taxation that is decided at the European Union level, but clearly when we talk about applying the waste hierarchy, that would also mean that taxation is, the levels of taxation are set in function of the waste hierarchy. It would also, of course, include taxation on waste to energy with energy recovery, simply because recycling, preparation for reuse, prevention are higher in the waste hierarchy. So the fact that waste to energy provides energy, heat and power does not mean that there should not be any taxation on it, but the waste hierarchy should always be applied in terms of deciding on the level of taxation. I think that's the answer I would give. Thank you.
Thank you very much, señor Mr. Langendorf. Ahora sí, vamos a cerrar, a dar por cerrado este.
So, I think we can bring this first axis to a close. We've looked at the world situation in Latin America and Europe. We have the diagnosis, context and challenges, and we will be doing that after just a short coffee break, which will be served just outside in the foyer there. Please, just let's have 20 minutes and be back sharp in 20 minutes to continue with the second part of this day. Thank you.